name is Saloni Jain, and I would like to welcome all of you in the EMEA Leaders Diversity and Inclusion Summit on behalf of Mice Quotient and its team. I would like to thank all our speakers, partners, and sponsors who have supported us immensely in bringing this event together. Our platinum sponsor, Roche, gold sponsor, Aruba, a Hewlett Packard Enterprise, engagement partners, ISC2 and FEM Diamond, and powered by Blue Octopus. Our supporting partners, African Diversity and Inclusion Center, Sharjah Ladies Club, British Council, South African Employees for Disability, AmCham Abu Dhabi. Our media partners, African Leadership Magazine and The Voice. Few instructions for the participants. You can adjust the screen size when someone is presenting or sharing the screen. So some of you may want to increase the size of the screen window of the presentation window. You can adjust that. However, some of you may want to see the speaker speaking and see the presentation in a smaller window. So that is totally adjustable. You can adjust the screen size as per your comfort. Few instructions for the Q&A. You can mention all your questions in the chat window. We will be looking at the chat box and pick some questions and ask to the speakers as the time permits. Whatever questions are left unanswered during the summit, we will make a note of them and pass on to the individual speakers. You can let us know who you want the question to be answered with, and we will get those questions answered at a later point in time. Okay, now we come to the most important part of the summit, and that is a very, very nice game, which is known as the scavenger hunt. Yes, so throughout the summit, I will be asking you to bring some things quickly, and whoever gets that thing first, guess what? He gets the surprise prize from Mice Quotient, and I can do it at any point of time. So you have to be very attentive throughout the program. All right, moving forward, I would like to start with the first session, which is promoting inclusive leadership. Opening keynote, the intersection of diversity, inclusion, and engagement. I would like to invite Mr. Darren Bergman. He is Member of Parliament, National Assembly, Shadow Minister, Industrial Relations and Corporation, Member of Parliamentary Forum, SADC, Constituency Head, Aberdeen. Mr. Darren Bergman, welcome. I welcome you and hand over the stage to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I must say that for me, the intersection of diversity, inclusion, and engagement is a very interesting topic. You know, I've always said that I've always talked about diversity, and in this discussion, I've now confined it, or had it confined to me, to speak about the workplace, because often in politics, I'm caught out between gender, religion, race, and before I can even make my points, my time is up. But today, at least, I hope I can make points in that the intersection of diversity, inclusion, and engagement around the workplace is something very, you know, it's very pinpointed. So to me, I'm always mindful of the words that there are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combination of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. And there are not more than 5 primary colors, yet in combination, they produce more hues than can ever be seen. There are not even more than 5 cardinal tastes, yet combination of them yield more flavors than can ever be tasted. Now, these were words that were spoken by Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Today, at least, I hope I get the idea that the intersection of diversity, inclusion, and engagement is a skill that must be learnt and it must be observed. But without it, your misunderstandings, your miscommunications, and your internal culture, it will never be at ease. Now, in South Africa, we have a Gini coefficient that is very wide. And when you talk about diversity, the wider your Gini coefficient, the less embraced or the less engaged your diversity. So you've got a gap between the rich and poor, for example. Now, our top managers in a company could be earning 100 times more than their staff members in the same company. So now you can imagine that person leaving, a staff member leaving his tin house in an informal settlement, goes on public transport to get to work, and then goes and asks his boss, who's just left his 5-bedroom house, has got into his $50,000 vehicle, goes and asks him for a raise. Now, would that employee be able to understand when the boss says no to the raise? Now, picture living in South Africa 25 years into the new democracy and still feeling the deep injustices of the past, where the working class still live, where they can live in the CBD, the wealthy can still live around the suburbs, but the poor still have to spend money trying to travel on public transport because of what was known as the racist urban spatial planning of the past, where black people were made to live outside of what was what we would call the white areas or the areas of success or productivity. So on a normal week, they would, they could get into trouble for being late because while most of their colleagues would probably only have to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, go for a shower, and then go to gym, drop off the kids, and then get to work leisurely, they would probably have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and then go groom themselves in what could only be described as an outhouse in dignity, then go catch what would be their first mode of transport, public transport. Now, this could be a taxi. You queue up for a taxi, which is often overcrowded. It could be a train, and this would be, then the series of delays from traffic, unreliability, and as I say, inevitably you'd suffer a delay. Now, you can imagine this person gets to work, and they've now met this boss or this manager from the suburbs. Inevitably, there's a mismatch in diversity. There's a misunderstanding in diversity, and misunderstanding challenge. So it's not surprising that during periods when there's train or bus strikes or vandalism, these modes of transport, that employees become vulnerable in a market where jobs are already scarce. So in this topic, we then speak about inclusion. Now, one of the biggest barriers to engagement in cultural diversity is inclusion. It's especially, in different cultures, the minute there's purposeful exclusion, there's a deterioration in what we call the internal culture. Now, exclusion creates a natural prejudice or a bias. It also creates a fear. We have seen this in the world, that when looking for resolutions in peace between countries and people, the biggest non-starter to negotiations is the direct or indirect exclusion of certain parties to the negotiating table. We also see it in generations and lost generations. And you can take any conflict I give you. I can throw more pertinent to our discussions today, the Middle East conflicts, where generational conflicts, the exclusion of people getting to know each other, you have to, because there's an exclusion of diversity, you only know people based on what you're told, and not because you're engaging with these people, not because you're engaging with the diverse people around you, just based on what you read or what you're told. So the challenge then has to be to find the sweet spot of inclusion. Now, because there's no doubt in one's mind, for an internal culture to thrive in the corporate or public space, embracing diversity and being inclusive is a need and a challenge. So it's more of a challenge to introduce it naturally with the least amount of artificial manufacturing as possible. So people tend to congregate around the comfort zones. In the workplace, it's people from the same department, It's people that share the same lunch breaks, or quite simply, it's actually people that look the same. Now, management attempt to interfere. They bring people together in what is contrived or forced, and this sometimes or often actually backfires. And what we need is subtle innovations, and this could be staggered lunch breaks, team building excursions, integrated workspaces, the non-barrier inclusion interventions that have an impact without seeming forced. And then we get what's called the engagement. Now, inclusion and engagement could be the relationship between activity and productivity. So I often say to people, they come to me and they go, whoa, look how busy I am. I've got so much meetings, so many meetings. And I go, wow, you're very active, but how productive are you? And 9 times out of 10, I get people staring blankly at me. And I say, but surely there's a difference between activity and productivity, because activity is just going to the meetings. But productivity is what you get out of the meeting, or what you give into the meeting, or what is produced out of that meeting. And then the same is then true between the relationship between inclusion and engagement. So I would suggest that inclusion is dipping your foot in the pool, whereby engagement is actually going for that swim. It is one thing to bring in cultural diversity or have people integrate or all be included in the same office space. However, until such time as people are engaging naturally and productively in a manner that produces the results and returns that are better than had there been no inclusion at all, then sometimes the result is, it's not the product, but rather the fact that the engagement produced a peace between two diverse parties, or an integration between them that will result in a relationship going forward. We see this again when dealing with countries and parties within countries. Often it is a politician that is the obstacle to peace, and I am a politician. But if people were left to integrate with each other in trade, in tourism, in cultural exchange programs, something as basic as sports, you'd probably find that the politicians would actually be out of a job. You'd probably find we might not even need the United Nations. In fact, out of all the participants on this platform, a lot of you probably don't realize that you're speaking to a Jewish white male that's been to both Palestine and Israel, that recognizes the right of both to exist, that spends his time trying to find meaningful ways to find peace between two people. The problem is, though, is that diversity, inclusion, and engagement intersect and overlap each other. Now, they all need to work hand in hand, but they all need a common thread now that will bind them for it to be successful. Now, if we truly ever going to embrace diversity, or to be completely inclusive and fully engage diversity, then you need to be fluent in one language that transcends all religions, all races, all genders, and all classes. A language that cannot be taught. It's a language that you have to feel. It's a language that you have to experience. So whether you're rich, you have to be able to feel what it's like to be poor. Whether you're white, you have to know what it feels like to be black. Whether you're on the Israel side, you have to know what it feels like to be on the Palestinian side. The language is empathy. It's real, honest, and heartfelt empathy. Understanding what it is to be in the other person's shoes, what it is to see it from the other person's eyes, and what it is to hear it from the other person's ears. Who better to end off with than Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, that said, without empathy, it is not possible to get the best from your team. So for this reason, it is empathy that is the key to everything. I thank you very much.
you so much for sharing those insights, Mr. Darren Bergman. I completely agree with you when you said that empathy is the language. Yes, true. Empathy is the language to understanding someone by putting yourself in their shoes is the most important intersection of diversity and inclusion. Thank you so much. We really value your thoughts and your time that you have shared with us. Anybody
Thank you.
wants to ask any questions, please feel free to set in the chat box. We have time to answer one question. So anybody, if you want to ask any question, please feel free to chat in the box. All right. So since we do not have any questions, I think your speech was very clear.